everybody! Today, Honey is going to read Flat Stanley, Show and Tell, Flat Stanley. Stanley Lambchop lived with his mother, his father, and his little brother Arthur. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and half an inch thick. He had been flat ever since a bulletin board fell on him. Stanley's family was used to him being flat. They didn't think much about it, except when Mrs. Lambchop needed to clean behind the fridge, or when Mr. Lambchop forgot his house key, which happened quite a bit to the Lambchops. Stanley was perfectly normal. That's why Stanley was surprised when Arthur asked, "Can I take you to show and tell?" Stanley frowned. "You mean because I'm so good at wiggling your ears," said Arthur. "Miss Plum really wants to see it." "Oh," said Stanley. "Sure, if Miss Plum says so." Stanley felt his face turning pink. It always turned pink when Miss Plum's name came up. Miss Plum was the prettiest teacher in the whole school. "Thanks, Stanley," said Arthur. "No problem," said Stanley. "That's what brothers are for." Arthur smiled to himself. He knew the real reason Stanley was going to show and tell, but he didn't say a word. At school, Arthur's classmates took turns showing and telling. Sophie showed her mouth, Squeakers. "He just loves cheese," she said. Manny held up his grandpa's false teeth. "My grandpa loves cheese, too." Arthur introduced Stanley, who wiggled his ears like crazy. "My goodness," said Miss Plum. "Today I have something for show and tell, too," Miss Plum added shyly. She held out her left hand. A big ring sparkled in her finger. "I'm getting married," said Miss Plum. Stanley felt his heart sink. "Miss Plum? Married?" The other kid jumped up and crowded around to look at Miss Plum's ring. "Let me see," said Sophie. She bumped into Manny. Squeakers slipped out her hands. "Ouch," said Manny. "Watch out." He dropped the grandpa's teeth, and false teeth bounced twice, then clamped onto Squeaker's tail. "Wheek!" squeaked Squeakers. He took off running. "Oh dear!" cried Miss Plum. She reached out to grab Squeakers. She and her new ring flew off her finger. To Stanley, the ring seemed to move in slow motion. He watched it sail towards Squeakers and fell straight down over the mouse's head. Then it landed like a sparkly collar around his neck. Poor Squeakers squeaked again and ran even faster. He zipped across the classroom, scampered up a bookcase, then vanished through a crack into the ceiling tile. "My mouse!" cried Sophie. "My grandpa's teeth!" cried Manny. "My ring!" cried Miss Plum. Stanley stood up. "I'll save you, Miss Plum. I'll save your ring and Squeakers and the teeth." Stanley raced to the spot where Squeakers had vanished. "Arthur," he said, "that crack up in the ceiling is like our window at home. Give me a boost." "On the count of 3, said Arthur. 1, 2, 3. With a grunt, Arthur pushed Stanley high over his head, just as he had a dozen times before. Mr. Lambchop really did forget his keys a lot. Stanley slid through the crack. "I see Squeakers," Stanley yelled. "Come here, boy. Come on." Below, the students heard crashing and thundering as Stanley chased the moth over their heads. "Go, Stanley, go!" yelled Manny. "No, it's no use," Stanley said, panting. "It's too fast." Then Arthur thought of something. "Sophie, where's Squeaker's cheese?" "Right here," she said. Arthur grabbed a slice and flung it through the crack. "Stanley, try this." The crashing stopped, the thrashing stopped, and the cloth of Stanley's arm poked through the ceiling crack. Squeakers sat in his hand, happily nibbling the cheese. Stanley's other arm poked out. The false teeth and the ring dangled from his fingers. Last of all, Stanley himself stretching out of the crack like a boy-sized strip of taffy. "Oh, Stanley," said Miss Plum, once he was safely on the ground. "You're my hero." She gave Stanley a big hug. Stanley felt his face turn pink, bright pink. "What's wrong with Stanley?" asked Fluffy. Arthur grinned. "His face always turns pink then Arthur stopped. He looked at Stanley. "When he's been wiggling his ears," he said. "Thanks, Arthur," whispered Stanley. "No problem," said Arthur. "That's what brothers are for."